All right, everybody, we are live. Thank you for coming in. Here we have Brandon Cope with us today. Everybody, let's just
Hey.
clap for him. Don't laugh at him. Oh, no, you
Oh,
guys
they're
are
laughing at me. They're not. I don't know if they're
Yeah,
clapping
they're
for
laughing
me.
at you.
Yeah, I look funny already.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's pretend that you and I don't actually know each other. So Brandon and I actually go back quite a few years, back until we were wee lads.
Yeah.
But I'm going to pretend I don't know him today, and I'm going to interview him as an author. And he is an author of most of what we're going to be focusing on today is a book that he has on back pain. But before we get into all of that, Brandon, tell me a little bit about yourself. Who is Brandon Cope?
Yeah. Well, aside from the wee lad that I used to be, professionally, I've done medical massage for years and corrective exercise with people, and I mostly help people with spine and sports-related issues. So lots of lower back pain that I've worked with for years and years, and I just see how I can do manual therapies, movement therapies, different forms of muscle testing, activating muscles for people, and then how can I get all the different core muscles and back muscles to activate so people don't have lower back pain anymore. And I've got a clinical practice. I lecture at a school up here in my town that I live in North Idaho, teaching anatomy, physiology, kinesiology, pathology, all the ologies.
Wow, you're
And
smart.
I just read a lot of textbooks, which is somewhat interesting. But
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
no, I just do all that stuff. And when COVID hit, I thought, well, I don't really have any work to do, kind of a lot of downtime. So I just decided to pull up a Google Doc and clack away. And I don't know how many thousand words I am later right now. I've kind of lost track. But yeah, I got together a book manuscript. And so it's been pretty fun. And I sent it to you a while back to proofread. So there's still more things to edit on it. But yeah, that's pretty much what I do.
Okay, awesome. So obviously this is not a fiction book for those of you who didn't catch that. He's not making all this stuff up. And I was always, when I was younger, I was really bad at recognizing, what fiction was versus nonfiction. So fiction is fake, and nonfiction is real. It's not fake. So keep that in mind for all you people that don't know that.
Yeah, I don't know. It could be a fantasy novel. I might cast spells over people's spines, and there might be a little
Whisper over
fantasy
them as
mixed
they
in.
lay on your
Yeah,
table.
I do some whispering, Yeah.
Nice. Okay, cool. So I have read your book, and I do know that you have your voice in it. I do like your voice in it. Would you say that you draw your writing voice from any other writers or books that you've read in particular, or is that kind of your own voice?
Yeah, I mean, there's some stuff in there that's like my own experience and somewhat my own style of writing, but there's definitely a lot of books I've read that are very similar, like fitness books and how-to for injuries and different things like that. I don't know, if I were to say that I'm trying to be similar to certain authors, one of my favorite authors is Kelly Starrett, who's written The Supple Leopard and Ready to Run and Desk Bound and some different things about injuries and stuff like that. I really like his writing style, and he's just got a super simplistic format, and I definitely have looked through his books and tried to copy some of that formatting that he has and some of that easy-to-read style. So I would say he's probably one of my author role models I look after, but yeah, I would say mostly him. I don't know if there's anybody else that I really try to copy too much in terms of how they write.
Okay. And in your style, I know a lot of people have different teaching styles, and a lot of people have different writing styles. And I feel like your book, you have to kind of combine the two. You have to have your own voice to keep people's interest, but you also have to say, hey, look, I know what I'm talking about. Where would you say the happy medium is for you as far as humor to keep people's attention and just, hey, listen, this is how it is. You need to do this stretch or else you're going to be in pain.
Okay, that's a good question because I feel like when I started writing the book, I put in a lot of humor. And as I asked different people to proofread for me, they were telling me, no, you've got like some weird jokes here. And there was like a joke I made about like the Death Star at one point that like, well, the only ultimate, like, what was my joke? I was like, we need to strengthen your core so your spine is the ultimate power of the universe. Just kidding. The Death Star is the only true power in the universe. I said some joke like that, and people were like,
And I
no,
love
cut
that.
that.
Okay.
I know. See, I thought that was funny. I was like, I want my people to read this and laugh. So I don't know. I've had a lot of ongoing debate of like how much humor do I leave in, and it's a lot of my own personality. Then I should cut that out. It's not professional enough. So I don't know. I don't know exactly where the balance is on that, but I think for me, I would rather err on the more humorous side. You know, people are in pain, their spines are hurting, they want to pick up a book that makes them feel good. Laughing makes people feel good. I want people to laugh. And a lot of the people I would expect to hand the book to would be like clients or students or people I'd potentially know personally. And so I think it's fun if they get a little bit of my personality from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you do have a wonderful personality, so I will
Thank you.
throw that out there. And he is taken. Sorry, ladies.
Yeah.
Would you say that people, or do you feel that people would take you less serious because of your humor, or would you rather maybe sell more copies because people like your personality and they're like, hey, I like his writing style and his personality, and he has some good stuff to say?
Well, okay, that's a really interesting topic because I do think that when I originally started writing the book, I wanted to write it because it was something I could have for a credential. You know, it's like, okay, I know how to help people with lower back pain, but I'm not Dr. Brandon. So how do I show people that, like, I know what I'm doing and you can trust me even though I don't have this fancy title? And writing a book was a really good way to do that. Oh, I'll just show everybody my different secrets and tips and techniques. And when they try it and it works, they'll know they can trust me and I know what I'm talking about, right? And so I think that that is a trick when it comes to showing a lot of personality, is it can almost come across as goofy and people can feel like, oh, I don't know if this guy's super serious, he's not academic enough or things like that. But I think that that's, at least my mindset at the moment, is that that's a risk worth taking, because if you can show people through your techniques and what you're trying to describe in the book that you really do know what you're talking about, and if they try these things, it really will help them, then I feel like the personality that you show through is an added bonus and makes people like you more because you feel like a real person and not kind of this robotical, cold, stiff, oh, I don't know who this guy is. I like his stuff, but I don't know if I care about him as a person, you know?
Yeah.
So I would rather be a little bit more warm in my presentation and let people trust me based on it actually working, you know?
Okay, awesome. So going back to your other point of, you said, hey, I'm not Dr. Brandon, but you do have all this knowledge. I feel like, especially with the internet these days, just anybody can put out a book and they can say, hey, you know, in order to fix your lower back pain, do 12 jumping jacks per day and you'll be great. Now pay me $50. So what makes your book unique and makes it more believable than other people, other than the fact that it works? But like, what makes it unique compared to some other works that might be out there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different books out there right now about lower back pain. And honestly, I think that there's a lot of great books that people can use and read and get great results. And I'm not going to say that mine is like the one size fits all and mine's the ultimate book and mine's better than all the others. I really think that when I've seen lower back pain, there are some similarities that you see across the board for a lot of folks with lower back pain. Their back hurts, right? But for a lot of folks, it can be different. You know, some people have a weak core, some people have an imbalanced core, some people have a compressed spine, some people have something with their organs going on, some people just have a ton of stress. I mean, there's a lot of different things that happen with people. And I'm totally under the mindset that if somebody reads a different book and they get great results, then that's awesome. But I think where my book stands out is I've got a different approach, where other people maybe are reading the other books, not getting results, and then they come to me and they find that they do get results. Well, if you want to know what I do, here's some of my methods. A lot of my clients come to me because they gave up on chiropractic, they gave up on PT, they're about to go under the knife for a surgery, they don't want to, and then they come see me. So a lot of times when people are looking into my work that I do, they've already kind of gone through the generic stuff that you would find in other books and textbooks and sort of the mindset of traditional clinical work with people. And they come to me because they want something with a different twist. And so I think that my book is a different twist. It's not necessarily like better than all the other things out there. It's just, here's a different option if the other stuff didn't work. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's how I would say.
So what would you say is the original reason that you wrote your book? Other than to help people, I understand that. But you mentioned you could give it to your clients. Was it, hey, I see there's an opportunity to make money? Like, what was your original reasoning behind putting your knowledge out there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how lucrative book writing is, you know, unless I were to sell like a lot of. Yeah, I mean, I think that if if I sold enough copies, it could be really good, you know, or at the very least, it could try to bring more clients in the door in terms of money or things. But I think one of the first things that really made me want to write a book, and just the idea of making content in general, podcasting, book writing, YouTube, whatever it is, was that there would be stuff that I would listen to and I would read, and I'd go, oh, I love this blog post article. I love this one book that I read. It was really good. And I would tell a client, hey, you should read this thing. I buy this book that I found. I'll send you the Amazon link. It was a great book. I loved it. It talks all about exactly your problem. They'd never do it. But then if I created a little YouTube video talking about something, or if I wrote a blog post and I sent it to them and said, hey, this is something I made, they'd go, no way, you made that? Oh, cool. I'll check that out. And so it made me realize there are people who just aren't really interested in all the different knowledge resources that are available to them. But when they know somebody who made it, they'll be interested in it because there's a relationship connected to it. And so there's a sphere of influence that I have over people because of my relationship with them. And if I can create content that will drive them into the knowledge learning, then that's all that they really need. And they specifically will do it because they know me, because of that relationship. And so it made me realize these people will never, I mean, I shouldn't say never, but very unlikely will these people ever actually go and learn this information that they need to learn unless I create it and give it to them, because they just aren't interested in the information. They're interested in my relationship with them. But it would be good for them to learn that. So that was one of the main motivations behind making content for people. And when I realized that there was just a lot of stuff that I was kind of, you know, putting down on the list of things I need to say, well, they need to understand this and that and this and that. And it was like, how do I make a long enough podcast episode? How do I make a long enough YouTube video? I need to just start writing this stuff down. And I think that as I started writing it down, not only did I realize this was great for other people to be reading, but I realized also this was really good because it organized a lot of my thoughts. And after I kind of went through my first draft of my manuscript, it really organized a lot of the work that I did in my own head and kind of helped me understand my own thinking. It brought a lot of clarity to my own mindset, and I think improved my clinical practice. So yeah, I think original motivation, good for people to read within my sphere of influence, and just good for my own organization of how I work with people.
Cool. So speaking of organization, go ahead and give me a summary of your book and why it's organized the way it is, if you had any sort of thought process behind that. But yeah, just like a summary of your book and what people can expect to find in your book.
Yeah, well, I'm going to just click on my my manuscript right now and take a look at it. Just reading off my table of contents here that I go through. I mean, yeah, the beginning of the book, I talk about kind of my own story with lower back pain and my experiences with it and what I've done in the past to figure that out and get that to go away. And then I've gone through kind of the statistics of if people have lower back pain, this is usually how it's going to affect like the globe, and this is like the cost of how much it costs as an industry and in our country and things like that. And then I go through and I talk about some of the different causes of lower back pain. So things like what's the emotional causes or the organ-related causes or the mechanical causes. I talk a lot about the mindset.
Let's pause for a second there.
Oh, yeah.
I think that's really fascinating, that there can be something mechanically wrong with you or not, and you can still have some back pain. And one thing that you've always told me is that pain is a symptom. It's not necessarily when you're feeling pain that's where the issue is. It's a symptom of some other pain. So, and obviously you don't have to name names here because, you know, client confidentiality and all that stuff. But can you give me some examples of clients that you've seen where perhaps they had some emotional trauma that was literally affecting them physically in their back and giving them pain?
Oh, yeah. Well, let's see. I can think of a few examples that are really good ones that they weren't actually in the back, though. There was a really good one in somebody's hip one time that I'll tell you about just because it was a really emotional story. There was a gal I was working with. She was actually a PT aide, and instead of going to the PT, she came to me. So classic story. People usually see me when they don't want to see the traditional folks. But she came into my office, and she told me that she had been trying to do a squat, so like a barbell back squat. She'd been squatting like 90 pounds, so nothing too crazy, and she had just collapsed under the weight. Her leg gave out, she couldn't hold the weight up, and she didn't know what was wrong. Her knees buckled, like, why did I just suddenly drop out of this? And she tried to do some more squatting, and she just couldn't. Her legs didn't have the strength. And so she came in to see me, and I saw her for a few weeks, and I kept working with her different hip muscles and her hip flexors and her glutes. And is it a stability issue? Did you tear something? What's going on here? We couldn't figure anything out, but it was pretty obvious that all of her muscles were really weak, and it was particularly weak on this one hip that she had. Well, I told her, it's really confusing. I can't figure it out. We need to get a little bit more information. What's going on here? So she said, well, let's see. What are other things that go on with my body? I guess I've got tightness here and there. And, oh, yeah, I grind my teeth every night, and it's really bad. And I said, oh, you grind your teeth? How long have you been grinding your teeth at night? And she said, well, for years now, since I was about 14. It suddenly started, and I was grinding my teeth. And I said, what happened when you were 14? And then she told me, well, my mom is schizophrenic, and she tried to kill me in the kitchen with a knife. Oh, whoa. So there's like a serious trauma that initiated this grinding of the teeth. So then I said, forget your leg. Let's go up and take a look at your jaw. I look at her jaw, and her jaw is shifting way over to the same side as the hip that was out of alignment and causing problems. So I go back to her jaw, release a whole bunch of jaw muscles. I show her some homework to release the jaw muscles. We're going to just focus on your jaw for a little bit. She comes back a week later. Her jaw's feeling a lot better. That's awesome. I take a look at her hip. Her hip muscles are back online. They're active. They're strong. She's got better range of motion. I take her right over to the squat rack. We put 90 pounds on the squat rack, and she squats it up and down, no pain. For her, it was purely an emotional issue. I didn't need to touch her muscles or try to release stuff with her hip or anything. She had trauma that was stored in her jaw. We had to address the emotional issue, and then all of a sudden the hip function came right back, right? So
that's incredible to me. And I'm not sure if you remember when you saw me for the first time. I remember I texted you, and I was like, I'd like to see you professionally. I literally sent you that text. I don't remember if you remember that. But,
I don't know if I remember, but yeah.
You don't know. You just got so many people that you help all the time. Nice.
Yeah.
And I had been playing rugby for a couple years, and I ruptured a disc. And I went through, again, I saw a chiropractor, didn't do anything, just took my money, and he came and he like rubbed my back and popped my neck and was like, all right, see you next week. That'll be $50. And that went on for a couple of months. I realized that wasn't helping. I did physical therapy for, gosh, it was like 9 months or something like that. And I could feel that I had strength, but there was always still pain and instability, as you mentioned. And I had taken a break from rugby because I clearly couldn't play rugby in this condition. I couldn't like barely run, and if I got hit or bumped just walking down the street the wrong way, it'd be like terrible pain, and like I'd hold my back, and all this terrible stuff. And I went and I saw Brandon. This is a personal reference for anybody that wants to go see Brandon up in Idaho if you're up there. And I had seen him a couple times, and you found that there was a muscle in my jaw that was holding tightness. And literally, I saw you for 1 week, and you fixed it, and that was it. And I played rugby again, like no issue. And that's incredible to me. I don't know if that particularly was emotional trauma. Maybe it was. But it's so fascinating to me that your body is so interconnected that your jaw can hold tension and bring trauma to your back from something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if yours was an emotional thing or not, but there was a connection between your jaw and your hip. Yeah, I do remember working on that with you way back in the day. Yeah.
So what kind of practice would you what would you say that you practice? Are you a kinesiologist, or what do you call yourself?
Yeah, I mean, medical massage, because I do massage therapy, but I've been doing it for like 10 plus years now. And I mostly work with people's medical issues, and I'm very technical about it. And so I just say medical massage and corrective exercise, because I've done training for years now too. So it's a little bit of a mix where I'm going to work on some muscles, assess them, release them, and then I'm going to have people do some exercises, some muscle activation, send them home with some homework, and then I'm kind of coaching them through some lifestyle changes they need to make. And, over the progression of a few months. Then hopefully we're going to see some results, and I'll send people out the door eventually with a little self-care plan. Here's what you got to do to take care of yourself so you don't really need me anymore. And that's pretty much how I work with most people.
What would you say the biggest lifestyle change that someone can enact in their lifestyle to decrease their lower back pain would be?
Yeah, it's really going to be stretching out your hip flexors and moving a lot more. It's not necessarily that like sitting is the evil, but I would say just being sedentary, like not moving a lot. So even if people are standing up and they have perfect posture and they're totally static, holding themselves still, that can still contribute to compression in the spine, tightness in the muscles of the core, and that can even contribute to lower back pain over time. And same thing as sitting. Sitting will shorten the hip flexors, and that'll cause issues in the spine and start to compress it and cause damage. But I find that if people just get fidgety, if they can just move and get out of their stagnant positions a lot, then usually they start to change different muscles. They stretch things more. They don't get totally compressed in one position. Fidgety people usually seem to have less problems because they're moving. They're active all the time. And that really prevents a lot of issues that I find with the spine especially.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. Well, let's go ahead and continue with your book summary that I so really interrupted and went on a tangent. I think you had left off with how there can be emotional trauma that you need to fix sometimes.
Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, some of the main causes that I see, there's like the somatogenic causes, which are going to be a mechanical issue, and psychogenic, which could be something related to more emotional issues. You can also have issues that come to the visceral organs. So if people have issues with like their kidneys, then that can cause pain in the lower back. If people have a cancer that's going on, if they have things like diverticulitis, any kind of inflammation in the abdomen could possibly refer and cause lower back issues.
Would you say that diet has an impact on that as well?
Yeah, I don't know if I would. I know that a lot of people are championing like the diet rants on the internet with podcasting these days, and I wouldn't necessarily say that diet is like the main issue, but if people have a high inflammatory diet, so sugars, alcohols, breads, and if they're eating a lot of things that would be an allergy for them, then that can definitely raise the level of inflammation in the body. And so if you have kind of this weak link in the chain of your spine that's getting inflamed, that'll probably get worse by diet. So I do think that's a contributing factor, but I don't usually consider that like the main factor for people.
Yeah, well, you just named like 5 things that I like: sugar and alcohol and bread, and maybe there's only 3. I can't count.
Those are only 3.
But
2 beers, 2 cupcakes. I don't know.
Exactly. Anything else for your summary, or does that wrap it up?
Oh, no, there's more that I could get into with that. I think another really big component that I talk about right at the beginning of my book is just not only the causes, not only my own story, but a lot of the mindset that comes into chronic pain. Because I see so many people who think that their lower back pain is going to be a quick fix. And that's not usually the case. Most lower back pain is what you would consider a chronic condition. So it's going on for like several months, 3 months at least, probably longer than that. And people think that, well, can't you just crack me and it's suddenly going to feel better? Can't you just rub these muscles and it's suddenly going to feel better? They want the quick fix. And unfortunately, lower back pain is what I consider a lifestyle condition. Not necessarily meaning that you're going to have it for the rest of your life, but just that the way you live your life very much changes and influences the degree at which your back is bothering you. How much you're sitting, how active you are, do you stretch, do you exercise regularly, what's your diet like? These are things that people are choosing every single day. It means that they have to participate and be active in their own health of their body. Most of the time when people are generally healthy, they don't really have a lot of issues with their back unless maybe they have done something really, really damaging to it. They've had some kind of injury, sports, or trauma, something that's gone on. But if people generally live a very sedentary life, eat unhealthy foods, they're not really moving, exercising, they've got a lot of emotional stress. If you've got a general state of unhealthy lifestyle, usually something's going to flare up, and the spine is a very common thing that'll start to get inflamed, right? So yeah, mindset's a big part of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and ask if someone were to come see you professionally, or maybe someone else in your profession, what would they expect from a visit? I know this is getting a little bit away from your book, and I've come and I've experienced when you work on me. But if someone were to come for the first time, and so they wouldn't be surprised, what could they expect from a session with you?
Yeah, and honestly, what you would get in a session from me is basically what I write about in my book. so so it's got some crossover here because I pretty much just write about what I actually do with people and then teach people how to do that on their own. So yeah, when people come in the door, I do a super thorough assessment. I'll spend 90 minutes assessing people like crazy, which a lot of people don't get. And I got to tell you, so many people come in to see me. They say, yeah, I saw the doctor. He looked at some scans, barely talked to me for 5 minutes, told me I had this and recommended I get a surgery. Didn't even touch the area that was painful. Didn't even really ask me a lot of questions. I don't do that. I sit down for 90 minutes. I'm going to ask a bazillion questions. I touch all the areas. I move people around. I ask them a lot of details about how it feels. And then we try to create a strategy of how to treat that and get it to get better, you know? So that's always day number one when people come in the office. Then following that, in the following weeks and months later, I usually go through a lot of just trying to bring the pain down. Because if somebody's in a lot of pain, then they're not going to be able to move. They're not going to have motivation to do with their own self-care. So the first thing is we've got to try to release tissues, bring the inflammation down, stretching, traction, try to open up the body so it doesn't feel as painful. Then we get into a phase where I need them to be more active. Now we're going to start strengthening, stabilizing. We got to stimulate the muscles so that they turn back on. And that's where I need people to be really motivated for their self-care, and it can be tough for people. They don't always like doing all the extra. I didn't used to do planks every day, you know. Well, now we got to do some planks, you know. So that's usually my phases: assess, release stuff, strengthen, activate things, and that's usually a few weeks or months of working with people. And that's
so I know the latter
oh,
portion of that you were talking about requires a lot of interaction from the patient and work on their part doing the exercises. For the first visit, when you go and you're doing the muscle testing, can you explain a little bit about what that is, and then maybe a little bit of the releasing too, and how that plays an important role?
Yeah, I mean, I go through my intake where I'm just conversing with people, asking questions, getting their health history and all that. And then I'll usually go into a lot of palpation. You know, I do medical massage. It's all about touch with people. And so once I start to feel, okay, this muscle feels painful to them when I touch it, this one feels tight, and I kind of get a picture of what's going on with different muscles, and maybe I check some range of motion or some activation or things like that, then yeah, I'll get into some muscle testing. And the muscle testing I got trained in is called neurokinetic therapy, and it's mostly just trying to determine how the brain has caused imbalances with muscles as they activate. So I might look at like the quadratus lumborum muscles, which are the two muscles that are very large sitting right at the lumbar spine on each side. And one of the common assessments I'll do is I'll test those muscles against each other and see which muscle is overactive, which one is underactive, and is there some kind of neurological dominancy. So it's not a strength issue, it's a turning the light switch on issue. And one muscle is turning the light switch on a little brighter than the other. And so sometimes if I release that muscle, tone it down a little bit, it'll help the brain activate the other muscle that's being underactive. We bring balance and stability to the spine, and the pain goes down.
Balance in the Force.
In the Force, yeah. We can always bring it back to Star Wars.
Yeah.
Or Lord of the Rings.
What does a muscle test look like generally?
Yeah, it's a very light movement, and it's very isolated. So you really have to know that kinesiology. Fortunately, I teach kinesiology, so I've spent a lot of time studying that. But you really have to know where exactly is the muscle attached, how exactly does it activate in a precise, isolated format, and then I'm just going to have them do a very light touch of movement where I'll usually use my hand and have them kind of press into me towards my hand. And then with that little ability of activation, usually I can feel a little bit if it feels kind of weak. Do they have a lot of strength there? Can they move it very well? Was there a delay to the activation? Did it feel like they were, kind of, what's the word I want to use? Not stumbling. Shaking. There's the word I want to use. Shaking with the activation. Could they hold it really solid? And then usually for the person, they'll feel the same thing. They'll feel like, oh, it was really hard to use that muscle. Or man, I really had to think about it. I felt like I've never used that muscle before. It was really complicated. Or, man, as soon as I went in that position, it was almost like painful right away. Things like that will indicate for me that there's a weakness in the muscle. The brain is not connecting to it very well. We need that muscle to have more activation, right?
So I've got a more in-depth question then. So let's pretend we're going back, 10,000 years or 5,000 years, many thousands of years ago, before people understood muscles and what you understand. If someone had an injury where their muscles were, like you said, the light switch was shut off, how long would it take their body to turn that light switch back on naturally? Or would that never happen? Or what would they just be in chronic pain for the rest of their life? What would that be like?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. There's a lot of theory about rural tribes, rural people groups, even today, that live outside of our more modernized civilization. And, if they're hunter-gatherers, what are they actually doing when it comes to diseases and ailments and joint pain, And the common idea is that joint pain, musculoskeletal injuries, spinal injuries are a very modern, urbanized problem. When people move a lot, when they're living a lifestyle where they're on the go, they're running, they're lifting, they're hunting something, when they have a lot of strength, even from early development, right? Today, we take our kids and we put them in front of TVs, we put them into classrooms where they're sitting all the time. If a child grows up outdoors where they're hunter-gatherers and they're moving all the time, they're going to have a different developmental, from the beginning, level of strength in their tissues and bones that will carry with them into adulthood and hopefully build a much stronger system for their entire body. So there's a common thought that for that 10,000 years ago humanity, they probably didn't have nearly as many joint issues. Now, would it go away on its own? That's hard to say, because if it was something that they developed as a chronic issue, like they just were always shooting their bow and arrow on this one direction, on this one side of their body, and they didn't necessarily balance out with doing it the other way. So they created a muscle imbalance, and that started to erode at their joints, and it damaged it after a while. Then assumably they would only be able to fix that if they rested or if they tried to change the direction of their movement. And I don't know if people would necessarily have the education to think that way and try to change it. So I don't know if people would have found solutions or if they would have just injured themselves until they got to the point where they couldn't continue and then they had to rest. So it's hard to say.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because like when I ruptured my disc for the first time, I guess the only time, when I had just ruptured my disc, I remember the next day I literally had to crawl on my hands and knees to get an ice pack out of the freezer. And I was like 24, 25 at the time. I was in peak shape, probably one of the best shapes of my life, playing rugby multiple times a week, working out, running around, all this stuff. It's just like a little freak accident, and I have a ruptured disc, and all of a sudden I am very weak. And I just remember thinking, like, if there was a tiger, I'd just be dead. Like, there's nothing I can do. And even after I did rest for a long time, like, a few weeks just laying in bed, and then started to try and get into exercise, I was still basically immobilized. And it was very humbling, and it makes me think, like, without modern understanding of the human body, could people have recovered for this, or would it have just been the end? That's it, lights out.
It's incredible how the simplest and sometimes even just the smallest occurrence of damage in the body can create such significant pain that any little movement is painful, and it immobilizes you. It's very humbling indeed.
So I'm not sure if you would consider yourself an expert in this, but what would your opinion be on stretching? And I'm not necessarily talking about like a pre-exercise stretch where you want to maybe have dynamic movements to loosen up your muscles. I'm talking about like after heavy exercise, whether it be a long run or working out in the gym. Outline for me what your opinion is on some good stretching habits and if they're useful at all.
Yeah, well, I would tell people that it's a smart idea in general that if you've used a certain muscle group, to go ahead and stretch that muscle group after you've used it, right? Just as a general rule of thumb, it usually helps you to not be overactive and overuse those muscles. So like I see a lot of guys go into the gym and they hit up their chest and their bicep like 3 times a week, you know? And it's pretty easy to overuse those muscles.
You're talking about me, huh?
Yeah. Well, just kind of the male population. It's a pretty common thing, you know? And what do you know? Men get a lot of bicipital tendon tears. You know, they overuse their bicep too much. They didn't stretch it out. They didn't take good care of it and give it days of rest. And so then they've damaged the muscle tissue, right? I think that as a general rule of thumb, if you went out on a run, you've worked your quads, your glutes, your hamstrings, your calf muscles. Let's stretch some of those muscle groups afterwards, right? Now, the generic way of stretching is going to be a static stretch. So that's where you're just holding it for a long period of time. You're not going in and out of it. And this would maybe be a stretch you'd hold for like a minute, possibly 2 minutes or longer. And those are great stretches to do for people. I think a lot of people don't like doing those stretches because they are uncomfortable. Sometimes it's hard to get into those stretch positions, and it makes people feel like they look weird. And it's time consuming. You just have to sit there and wait and kind of suffer with it. And I don't think people always like to do that, you know. But it really
you would
is
still
good.
say it's useful?
It's very useful, yeah. The only controversy I would bring up is that if a person is a competitive athlete, then sometimes stretching can decrease a little bit of your muscle activation if you do really long stretching. And so it's definitely worth looking into and considering how you want to stretch. And if you feel like you're wary of really long stretching because you don't want to loosen your muscles up too much, then you might do something like myofascial release instead, where you just go on a foam roller or roll with a tennis ball and you'd kind of roll through the muscles. And sometimes that's more effective in trying to loosen it up without necessarily deactivating the muscles, because you're not pulling the fibers like apart directly. So just a few technicalities to think about if you're competing really intensely at a high level.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, well, let's kind of go back into the writing a little bit more now. When you were writing your book, what were your writing habits like?
Yeah. Gosh, that brings me back to a lot of early mornings with coffee. And honestly, I got to say, I love the routine of writing. I don't know. Some people talk about how they try to write things and it's a grind and you've just got to like get it done and make it happen. But I loved waking up early in the morning, sitting at my computer and just typing away at stuff. And I would write a lot on my computer, but I actually would write a lot on my iPad tablet. And I don't know what it is, but there's something funky about how if I made the moment of writing too grandiose, it would feel like I'm supposed to write something really grandiose. But if I made my writing really casual, like I had a random thought and I'll just jot down some ideas on it, and who cares if they're good ideas or not, I'll just write them down. When I brought down the level of expectation, it always seemed like I wrote something really great, you know? So I realized that writing on my tablet made it feel more casual. So I would do a lot of writing on that, just sit in a couch in the living room, drink my coffee, and I just kind of write whatever came to my mind first. I wouldn't necessarily try to like be too linear with it. And I had an outline, you know, that was like a linear outline of like subjects I wanted to hit, but I just think, okay, what's a subject I have on my mind for today? What are some random thoughts I can do to that? And here we go. Even though it's all the way down in chapter 8, I'll write some of the ideas down for that. And there we go. I wrote 1,000 words. Perfect. Now I'll go on to my next thing, you know. Definitely a morning thing for me. I really cannot write in the evening at all.
Yeah.
Very much a wake up and first thing, got to write stuff down.
Mm-hmm. How many words is your manuscript?
Let's see. I could probably look at it right now. I would say, as I've been going down through my editing process, okay, good. Currently I have it at about 40,000 words. Yeah, I've cut a lot of stuff out. I had it up, maybe, I can't remember what my highest one was about. I think I maybe got up to about 70,000 words at one point. And as people were proofreading and I changed things, I cut a lot of stuff out. At one point, I chopped out a whole chapter, and so I cut out like 10,000 plus words. That was
Too many
a
Star
little
Wars
stab in my
jokes or
heart.
what?
No, it was just something that I realized that the chapter needed to be a book in itself, and it was better to just not explain it than to explain it too briefly and confuse people. So I realized I just have to cut this out. There's no way I can fit it into this book.
So we got book 2 coming out from you soon. Nice, I like it. How long would you say it took you then to get to that? We'll call it 70,000 words, since that's what you hit. How many months of writing did it take you to get there? Or days if you're just a badass?
No, it wasn't days, because when I started writing a little bit of ideas down pre-COVID, but I was still working a lot, so they were just like a small amount of writing. And I probably did that over the course of like 6 months or so, but I didn't do a whole lot of writing at that point. It was just like little bullet points of ideas and then kind of some continuing follow-up ideas after that. Maybe I wrote like 10,000 words in that period. But then when COVID hit and suddenly I had a ton of free time, there was probably another 6 months or so after that where I really pounded it out and was just writing a lot of words every day. So the majority of it, I would say, was more of like a 6-ish month process when I didn't really have a lot of work post-COVID, you know.
And how many hours a day was that on average?
Probably just like an hour and a half to 2 hours, first thing in the morning. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So are you... I don't think you've officially gone with a publisher, right?
No, I am still very much in the air about this. I think I've decided that I want to go with self-publishing because I really want to have full control over it. It's just a matter of which group do I go with self-publishing through, how much money are they going to want me to put down at the beginning, things like that. I don't know. I've thought a lot about the traditional publishing, but I don't know if I want to go with that. So yeah, that's still a decision that's like the decision that's in front of me right now with the book, actually.
And do you think you want to have hard copies of your book, or is it going to be all digital?
No, I want to have hard copies. Yeah. I really want it to be something that people could just be at home. They pull it out right in front of them. It's like a book on the ground next to their foam roller, and they wake up in the morning and say, oh, my back's in pain. Okay, I got to find Brandon's book, and here's what do I do about it for today, you know? So, yeah, I want it to be a very tangible book.
Okay, awesome. What impact on the world do you want your book to have?
On the world?
Yes, on the world. The whole world is going to read this.
I want to convert the whole world to Brandon's method. No, I really just see this as a book that would impact my sphere of influence, like I was saying earlier. So my clients, my students who take my classes, I'm sure other people outside of that who I wouldn't meet who would hear about it and pick it up. I really see this as a book where I would probably be able to have the copy in my hand, hand it to somebody I know and say, here's the book I read, you need to read this. And, you know, put it on my website. And if I got, you know, a few thousand people from my own sphere of influence, and maybe over the years I'd get even more than that, you know, as I pass it out to people, I think that would be good enough for my own personal ambitions. You know, I don't necessarily need to make it the New York Times bestseller or anything like that, you know. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm aiming for, is just the people I know who probably wouldn't pick up a book on back pain. Here's my book, read it because I wrote it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Any final comments from you? And do you want to read an excerpt, or are we gonna leave the audience guessing?
Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. I could maybe read some kind of excerpt from it. Let's see. I'll read a little bit of something I have at the beginning here where I talk about it. The title that I have for the book right now, and I've gone through a bunch of different title ideas, but I think this is going to be my favorite one. It's called Spinal Hygiene, and that's because the book is all about how you can prevent lower back pain through just daily lifestyle changes, you know? So I'll read a little excerpt from it right here, okay? Why do I call the book Spinal Hygiene? Many times while I work on clients, I will make a connection between working on the fascia around their spine and dental cleaning. Each slow, deep stroke of my hands moving across the tissue is similar to a dental hygienist cleaning plaque off of teeth. This is really getting inside of Brandon's brain here. Somehow, it just seems to be a similar image in my mind. For the record, your spine doesn't actually get cavities. It's only my imagination. But I want you to have the mindset of daily maintenance on your spine. If you want to avoid cavities in your teeth, you need to spend a few minutes each day cleaning them. Same idea with your spine. If you want to prevent the majority of back pain issues, then you need to spend a few minutes each day cleaning up those tissues around the spine. Don't eat too much sugar for your teeth. Likewise, don't sit too long for your spine. It's so easy to get germs from not washing hands or taking baths. We've made hygiene a standard cultural ritual in America. We have daily practices of showering, hand washing, teeth brushing. Those everyday practices prevent germs and bacteria from causing problems. We also need daily practices to prevent lower back pain. That's the whole point. The big picture and focus of the book is just simple spinal hygiene, daily practices to prevent lower back pain. So there's my excerpt.
Awesome. That was very well said. And I'm glad you read that excerpt. I definitely need to get off my ass and stretch a little bit and run around a little bit more some days.
Yeah, we all do. We all do. It's easy to sit down. Yeah.
I'm lazy. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming, Brandon. I'm sure you'll hear that later. And hope to speak to you again, have you on the podcast again, and maybe talk about some of your fiction or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I love writing. There's always something new on my mind to write about, whether it's nonfiction or all kinds of weird different fiction and world-building ideas. So lots of fun stuff to talk about. Yeah, thanks, Matt. It's been a lot of fun to have a place to talk about the stuff I've worked on and to hear it appreciated. And, it's fun to talk about some of these things. So.
Nice.
Yeah.